Hello, and welcome to the Metta Hour podcast with Sharon Salzberg. I'm Lily Cushman. I produce this podcast, and today we're coming to you with a brand new interview for episode 271. Sharon sits down with poet, author, and Zen master Henry Shukman. Henry has been on a lifelong journey of awakening and healing through meditation. He is the spiritual director emeritus of the Mountain Cloud Zen Center in Santa Fe. He teaches all over the US and Europe and is the author of several books, the latest which came out in 2024 called Original Love. Henry is also the creator of the app called The Way. This is Henry's first appearance on the podcast and a very connected and intimate conversation with Sharon. Henry starts by talking about his many challenges in early life and how he experienced a spontaneous spiritual awakening at the young age of 19 years old, how he first came into meditation, and eventually how he came into Zen teachings. There's a lot of conversation about his latest book, Original Love, and the various teachings within the book about mindfulness, community, concentration, awakening. The whole gamut is there. Henry is also someone who teaches about how mental health fits into spiritual practice and the importance of community and connection on the spiritual path. The episode closes with Henry leading a guided meditation practice. Let's dive right in. Episode 271 of the Metta Hour, Sharon Salzberg and Henry Shukman.
Hello, Henry, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real joy and honor to get to speak with you.
Oh, it's lovely to get to speak with you. And just before we get started, tell me how you are and where you're beaming in from today.
I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is my hometown, has been for about 30 years or more. And, it's sunny, fall, a little bit less blisteringly hot than it has been over the summer, and really beautiful.
It's one of my homes. It's been a long time since I've been there, but I can feel the surroundings, that you're in. It's really quite great. This is your first time on this podcast in honor of your newest book, Original Love, which was published in July of 2024. So a big congratulations to you. You've been involved in the meditation community for so many years as a poet, scholar, teacher, as well as the spiritual director emeritus of Mountain Cloud Zen Center. So it's wonderful to see how you've brought all of your experience and expertise together to write this new book. So I thought we could begin with your story. What drew you to the spiritual path initially, and how your early life experiences might have contributed to how the path has unfolded for you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I had a couple of things that necessitated my doing something, and one of them was misery. I was in my early 20s. What's new there? In my early 20s, I was really pretty miserable, and I'd had a very difficult upbringing. Although I didn't know it at the time, I'd had very severe eczema right through my childhood, from infancy into my 20s, and I was oftentimes hospitalized for it as a young kid. And I kind of never quite understood that this somehow what I was going through was particular. It wasn't, not everybody went through this. I could see lots of people didn't, but I just sort of, inhaled it as the way the world was. And it was only in my early 20s that I started to realize that I was how unhappy I was, really. And I had two good friends who meditated, and one was my age and one was way older than me, in her 80s. But both of them said, you should be doing this. And eventually, luckily, I listened to them. But there was another reason too, which was that when I was at 19 years old, I went away from home for 6 months and worked in South America. I grew up in Oxford, England, so couldn't have been more contrasting. But while I was there, my eczema miraculously got better. Different diet, different climate, different, social circumstances, out of my family orbit or whatever it was, all those probably played a part. But also I had a sudden weird moment of some kind of absolute recognition that my place in the world was utterly different from anything I'd ever thought it might be, and that I belonged to the world, to the universe, incredibly intimately. And it just sort of fell on me out of nowhere. And it was so kind of searingly true, to me at the time. It seemed so much more true somehow than the way I ordinarily understood life and myself and so on, that it kind of stayed with me as both this sort of promise that there was some other way of being alive, which I'd stumbled into just then. And by the way, stone cold sober and everything. It wasn't like I was some South American hallucinogen. Not at all. I didn't do that. But it also stayed as a kind of question, like, well, what on earth was that? And somehow I must address it. I mean, in the manner of these things, of course, it faded after a few weeks. But I longed to explore it, find out what it had been, and had just no idea how one might do that in the world that I was in. Very academic. I was doing a PhD at the time, and I'd grown up in Oxford, where my parents were professors. There was just I hadn't heard anything in my world that corresponded to what that sudden sort of revelatory moment had been. And it was only when I started meditation that I just began to pick up the hint of a trail that, there might be people who sort of knew what that had been, and that you could in some way explore it further,
Well, that's a beautiful, beautiful depiction. I really appreciate, by the way, the word misery, which one doesn't hear very often. In translating the Pali texts, the word dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A, figures, and it's the old-fashioned translation, which is what I'm used to,
Yes.
is suffering. And it doesn't just mean, tragedy. It's all levels of dis-ease and uncertainty and kinds of things. But more contemporary translators are often using a word like stress. And I think, I don't know, like, I'm not a translator myself. I'm not a scholar, but there's something impactful about misery, which was like, oh, yeah. And I think, your experience as you describe it, was so beautiful in calling it revelatory, because I think, we may have those openings, but we're full of doubt and consider it like a blip or, something. I don't think I'll tell anyone about this, but to understand it as an alternative vision of life, that is actually present, I think is a very special thing. So over the years, I wonder how your understanding of practice has shifted from exploration to discipline and toward love itself.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I suppose initially it was like it was a palliative measure. It was anything to somehow try to, reduce my anguish, and my anxiety and my unhappiness and my kind of, wayward mind. That, I didn't, in a way, I couldn't even have said that about it, but I just knew I needed it. I needed something. And fairly quickly, I started to get some fruits of, the kind of thing I just started to calm down a bit. I think I'd been living with such a kind of overdriven, overwhelmed nervous system for so long. I barely knew. It was really only in that that moment, that instant of discovery, that had hit me, that I'd really seen, because it left a wake of great peace and joy and sensitivity and lightness and openness but which fairly promptly closed over again, but I just, at least I'd seen that there was another way. Not that I could live another way at all, but gradually, just the discipline of sitting daily. And I made it, I was pretty damn good, if I say it myself, about sticking to it, because I was so desperate. So that dose of daily sitting, it did calm me down. And then gradually that reawakened curiosity, primarily about that moment when I'd been 19. What had that been? How could you find out more about it? How could you explore it again? So initially it was treatment, it was therapy, it was helping this rattled nervous system. Then it became exploration. And then, I got wind of Zen. So I started out doing TM, Transcendental Meditation, which is kind of the only game in town in London in the late 80s, which this was. Well, it's the only game that I found out about anyway. And that was 20 minutes twice a day. Then I came here to Santa Fe, actually, the age of 29, and I stumbled across Zen, and I just got this inkling that Zen understood that experience I'd had on the beach. It was our mutual friend Natalie Goldberg reading me a passage of Dogen, and it made no sense to me, but I realized when I heard it, somehow I got that guy from the 1200s in this enigmatic paragraph of his, he knew what I'd experienced on that beach, and he was speaking from it. And so, Natalie connected me to a Zenny out here, and I started doing Zen. And right away, I thought, oh my gosh, this is a way of exploring the immediacy of being alive, and I really sort of took to it. So then, and that is a fairly disciplined practice, going to and the long retreats and all of that started. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, when you say that you shifted toward love itself, I saw in my own trajectory, my own path, which also began with an acknowledgement of misery, and some very real and intense suffering, and some wild intuition that if I could learn how to meditate, I could actually be happy.
Right.
And so off I went to India at the age of 18. And even though to some extent I was always practicing in a context of, we dedicate our practice to the welfare of all beings, I sort of didn't really care about all the beings, because I couldn't.
Yeah.
It was, as you say, it was a very personal healing journey that had to happen.
Yeah.
And it was only in my evolution over time that those words, like I dedicate my practice to all beings, which is really a form of love, became real.
I couldn't agree more. There was a gradual, I think it's little fits and starts for me when I was in my early 30s. I was, I was a writer. That was my profession for a long time, and I had a writing assignment that took me to Venezuela, and I was sitting. I stayed for a few weeks in a little fishing village on a beach to work on a book I was working on at that time. And when I'd finished the magazine assignment, when I'd done it, and in that little fishing community, I started meditating out on the beach every evening, and these kids came up and asked me what I was doing, and I told them I'm meditating, and they were just 10-year-old boys, and they wanted to do it too. So I gave them a quick crash course in just sitting, arranging the body, following the breath. And they loved it, and they when I said that, yeah, hey guys, you've done great, 5 minutes is enough, and they wanted to do more, and then they came and joined me every evening. I was there for about 6 weeks, and we sat together. And what was special there was I wasn't in a zendo, I wasn't doing TM, with a mantra. We were really just sitting outside in the warm evening air as the day gently closed and as night came on, and it was in a little bay, and you could hear the sea lapping and occasionally a little breeze through the palm trees. And it was just so natural and peaceful for human beings to gather and sit together and feel that they were being held somehow, and we just kind of, it was like there was nothing to it. It was really just a restful practice of ease, which wasn't what I guess the primary flavors I knew weren't quite like that. There was this sort of, you got to be still, you got to be absolutely silent, and and in the correct Zen posture, or with TM, you got to be really hammering on that mantra. It wasn't just let the world hold you, and and join the world, in a sort of subtle, easy, soft way. Recognize that you're part of it, and that you share your life with the rest of creation, and not in some sort of, I don't know, challenging way. You got to realize something. No, just in the most gentle way, just naturally joining the spirit of the close of day. It was, I don't know, that was a turning point for me, and just recognizing the place of love as a context, waking up love as an orientation that I could feel in myself towards others, that were coming out of practice.
It's very beautiful. I'm going to keep that sentence, let the world hold you. So the full title of your book is Original Love, the Four Inns on the Path of Awakening. Inns, the sense of like place of shelter, right?
Yes.
And here's a quotation from it. The proposition of this book and of the deep meditation traditions from which it draws is that it is possible to see through our sense of ourselves as separate entities and to break an enchantment we didn't know we had been caught in. So tell me more about the book, how it came to be, and how's it different from your memoir?
Yeah, thanks. The way it arrived in its initial draft was in a sudden 12-day sprint. I was staying up in totally unexpected, actually. I'd been teaching a lot and traveling quite a bit while teaching, and I went up to some cabin that some friends of mine had up in the mountains near Chama in northern New Mexico. And I thought I was just going to rest and hike and, that kind of thing. And the first morning, while I was waiting for the oatmeal, to cook, making a cup of coffee, this sentence came to me, and I wrote it down. And it's one of those things where, the next 12 days I couldn't stop writing this thing. And so no rest, but it was a thrilling ride. And that was the first draft of the book. And really what I didn't exactly realize it then, but I could see what I was actually writing down was a clearer look at the way I'd been teaching for the last year or two that I hadn't fully acknowledged. But I sort of acknowledged it through writing the book, which was like somehow with this sense of four different kinds of refuge that the practice can be. And that it's not like they have to be sequential, but there may be four different dimensions of practice. And I certainly acknowledge that there's many ways you can slice and dice it. This is just one of them that still makes sense to me. So that's how it came about. It was sort of a reflection of what I had been trying to teach over the last, couple of years, and what I felt I'd learned over the decades through the different dimensions of my own practice and path. It's different from my memoir. One Blade of Grass was pretty much sort of narrative, and whereas this book has got a lot of stories in it, but it's basically it's the first book I've ever written, actually, which is trying to kind of explain something or lay something out, more expository, I guess. So that's the big difference, that its primary purpose is to try to impart a certain look at the dimensions of practice. And yeah.
I want to go into the four ins in a minute, but your description reminds me of a little bit of this time when I was writing this book, Faith, and I was really struggling in a lot of ways. And I was working with Susan Griffin, who is a writing coach, and she said to me, "You've got to stop thinking of yourself as the person writing this book and think of yourself as the first person who gets to read this book. That it's actually something is moving through you." And you get to look at the screen and go, wow, look at that. That's interesting, rather than I've got to craft this and it's got to be perfect and I'm not doing it well and this is sort of a mess, and somehow in what you were saying gave me that feeling of the gift, of something arriving through us. So the book feels like a very important intersection of mindfulness and mental health, where you do describe these four ins as touchstones for cultivating mental well-being. And these four cornerstones are mindfulness, support, absorption or flow, and awakening. And I wonder if you can walk us through each of these.
Thank you. Yeah. And by the way, thanks for that acknowledgement about the mental health side. I've had my mental health challenges myself, as I was mentioning. And for me, my path has been, I've had the spiritual side of it going a long time, with primarily through the practice of meditation, but I've also done various kinds of therapy along the way. And I've kind of needed them all.
Yeah, sure.
Different times, of different ways. But so mindfulness, the way I present it here is that it's really about becoming aware and aware of what's going on inside us as well as around us, outside in our external sense experience, and learning to allow it, basically, to start by, opening up the door to it and allowing what is arising in this moment to be arising, both inwardly and outwardly. That's the heart of mindfulness as I present it in this book. Then support. Oh my gosh, I think it's so important to remember that somehow this isn't a solitary pursuit, which it can often feel like and seem like, and it can also, archetypes might be of the, the lonely, the hermit, on a mountaintop, the adept in a cave, the sort of solitary archetypes of deep meditation practice. But actually, the more over time we recognize it more and more as a communal, community-based practice, not, both, of course, physically and immediately, because we'll as we do get time sitting with others more and more, we'll recognize more and more how good that is, and how it sort of takes the pressure off us, and at the same time can really deepen our practice when we're in some kind of setting that's holding the space of practice for all of us, which we generate through community, through sangha. So it just to acknowledge that even though many people may most commonly do their daily sit alone because they're not living near or even in a practice center, still knowing that the fundamental nature of our life really isn't solitary. We're all obviously products of other people and other beings, and we live in infinite networks, really, and practice more and more reveals that, I think, over time. But the more we can acknowledge it early on and be seeking out forms of support and connection, the better. So it's really wanting to work against the sense that a lot of people, I think, today have with practice, that I've got to do my mindful minutes. It's just, it's me and the breath. And actually, so really to work against that, I think is important. And of course, I mean, personally, I've done quite a bit of weird stuff, shamanic and, and I'm into archetypal dream work that's very powerful. I'm quite into support that is not so material, energies and entities and whatever we might encounter in the collective unconscious or whatever it is. I'm not particularly religious, but I kind of believe in this collective unconscious stuff and getting support and guidance that's not so tangible as well. If we're curious about that, I think it's kind of cool personally. And nature, a lot of people feel the support of nature if they go for a walk in the woods or a walk on a beach, and that I just think that's really healthy and salutary and kind of turns down the dial on our kind of individualistic human self that sort of struggles to do everything by itself, So that would be the second in or refuge. And the third one, absorption flow, is really about, the reality is that we can get into absorption states in meditation. We can have that gear shift where suddenly, and it can come through a variety of practices, where suddenly it just becomes richer, easier, more fluid, more fluent. There's less effort or no effort. And often we don't know why it happened. It's sort of, what did I do? The gear just shifted, But I think that's quite sort of important, because it's suddenly we're finding of course it comes in many flavors, but underlying it, usually there's some sense of a kind of fulfillment or not needing anything to be different. And I think of it as falling in love with the moment, falling in love with now, just being fully kind of engaged, absorbed in experience right now. So I think it has quite a bit to do with flow states. I know that's not always said about meditative absorption or samadhi, but I think if you look at the qualities of flow states, there's clearly some overlap. And flow states are typically talked about. I'm thinking of the research of that great researcher Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the books Finding Flow and so on. That was his life's work. But he talked about flow being found in activities, whether it's athletes, musicians, writers, etc. But actually anybody finding flow in an activity. But in meditation, we find it, in a sort of an activity, or some would say not really an activity. Anyway, we find it in the quality of just being and reapplying our attention repeatedly to a certain anchor, or whatever practice it is that we're doing, including practices that are very close to not being practiced. They're just letting things be. Flow can just come on, and we find this fulfillment, this ease, and in our being. And it can come when we don't think our life is so good. We've got problems and issues that we're wrestling with in life, and yet we make the time for meditation, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, in spite of whatever challenges we may have in our own lives and whatever troubles there may well be out in the world, a wider world that we're very preoccupied with, we can suddenly just be in a state of peace. And I think that's really important. it's so good for us. And it's so good to be reminded how little we actually need in order to be happy. And then, how to be able to be able to tap into that. And of course, more and more and more over time, be able to sort of live from that, or to be aspiring to live from that in the way we act in the world. I mean, that's got to be good for the world.
Mm.
Yeah. But I haven't yet touched on the fourth one. Shall I dive right in?
Please, let's get to awakening.
Okay. So the fourth one, awakening. Of course, I'm using it here in a certain sense that not all traditions would use it in, but in the sense of awakening I'm using is basically comes mostly out of Zen. A lot of what I'm teaching in this book does not come out of Zen, and a certain amount does, and probably in this area there's more from Zen, which is really about non-dual experience. There's those sudden revelatory moments when the sense of self has just gone, or we've clearly seen right through it, or it's just completely quiet, and we sense that there's a dimension or a register of our being where we're just not separate from anything else. And I think that is, it's not, it can, at certain stages in practice, that might be a kind of goal, a destination we hope we're going to get to. We've heard about it. We read stories about it, and, oh man, I want a taste of that, but I think over time, it sort of, it quite naturally isn't any longer a destination. It's more something that we would aspire to live from. So living out the implications of non-separateness the best we can. And it's an amazing thing for a person to discover. On the one hand, because we're socialized so strongly to feel that we are the separate self we've always thought we were. But on the other hand, it's not so amazing because it really is only another way of looking at this moment. It's only another perspective that is not self-based, and it's just that perspective is feels so much better. There's much less anguish, and
So I'm wondering if there's a passage or an idea in the book that feels especially alive for you right now in our world of increased polarization and the rapidity of technological development and such increased conflict.
Yeah. Yes, there is for sure. I thought I'd just read a poem from the middle of the book.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this is just about, actually, it was a year after my dad had died, although I'd actually forgotten that, I'm ashamed to say, but suddenly remembered it. And this took place when I was back visiting my hometown, Oxford, in England. The young heron pauses mid-weir. Actually, I've got to just say a weir, probably many people don't know it. It's in the British Isles, it's a term used for a kind of dam where water flows over the weir, or flows over the dam, often between a river and a canal, a river and a pond, things like that. The young heron pauses mid-weir to stare at me. The young heron pauses in the middle of the weir to stare at me and waits so long there on its single stilt, mid-step, one webbed foot held aloft, a ribbon of froth fluttering from the other foot, planted in the paw of the channel, not a feather stirring, just the long neck adjusting like a snake for balance, and the hazel target of its eye locked on mine. That there's time for this damp day to turn bright, for the elms to sigh in a wind not made of air, for the path under my feet to soften like skin, and for the sound of the river to press its cool hands on my ears. what is this pressure holding my head? Why am I remembering all of a sudden that today marks a year since you died, and wondering where you've gone 1 year on, or whether you've gone at all? Who is this bird fixing me with its eye? Stately as an Egyptian prince, as if wearing time like a pair of wings it has only to open to bring back all the years of your life. At last, it lowers its foot and moves on.
Thank you so much for reading that. So beautiful.
Thank you for the invitation. Just to take a bit of time and notice the world around us, just to unplug from the sort of bitter noise of social media, just to notice the fabric of our actual lives, that are sort of continually being given to us and arising around us. If we just take the time to notice it, to get out of the echo chambers, of other human voices on social media that are just causing so much disruption and polarization and hate. Oh my gosh, it's like, what would happen if we just turned off social media for a month?
Mm-hmm.
How much might be solved, Ah. But, I mean, short of that, just taking the time to be quiet a little bit each day is an antidote.
One of my friends, to my eternal amusement, used the phrase microdosing loving kindness, and which I use every chance I get because I thought it was so fabulous. So your writing, your perspective, your teaching seems to emphasize the importance of small everyday moments or microdoses of awareness, of kindness, of original love. For example, pausing between busy bursts, taking the time to notice something beautiful, or feeling and tending to discomfort rather than immediately avoiding it. And I wonder if you have some simple suggestions for ways to practice these microdoses in daily life.
Yeah, I mean, I take my cue from much greater teachers than me who have provided things like, Thich Nhat Hanh had his thing of, the stop sign or a red light. Be grateful for the opportunity to take 3 deep breaths. When the phone's ringing, don't pick it up on the first ring. Take a breath. That little markers in the day, or if you're just about to get up from your desk, just pause and take a notice a whole breath blooming in and dwindling out, and then stand up. Just little things like that. Or if you're about to open a door, just take a breath. Just little interruptions at transition points in the day. And there's so many micro transition points. What if each transition point became a microdose moment?
Mm-hmm.
And loving kindness, awareness, just that pause of just being present, can really make a difference. And if it's coupled with a regular dose of formal practice each day, 20 or 30 minute sit or whatever you have, whatever one's dose currently is, that anchoring awareness, or the kind of refueling or the restoration of awareness through the daily formal practice, I think is really important. And it goes very well with the microdosing, because then those little incremental moments, they come alive much more easily if you've already got the main formal bout of practice each day happening. That's what I've found. And that's what I try to encourage people to do. It's always about, not feeling that there's a sort of great big thing to be done, a great big task of revolutionizing my consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just, it would be a revolution to just be 1% more aware. It's the little increment of what, little by little, a little becomes a lot.
Throughout your book, you also mention that community is an essential aspect of spiritual life, as you were just referring to earlier. And I know you've done a lot of community building through your teaching, events, and retreats at Mountain Cloud Zen Center. And I wonder if you could say something more about how important community is and how that's reflected in your work.
Yeah, I think it is. It took me a while to recognize how important it was, to be honest. I was quite a suspicious young man, and I was prepared to try this meditation thing, but I really didn't want to join anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it took a while before I'd go to retreats. That's okay. I'll do a retreat, but don't ask me to become a community member, and gradually that weakened. And then I found a community that I felt really at ease with. That it was non-demanding. I was quite probably hypersensitive to what looked to me like kind of power vortices.
Mm-hmm.
That looked unhealthy. I'd run a mile if I detected anything like that. And you quite often do in spiritual communities. You can see how they easily develop anyway. And so, but when I did find a group that there were no red flags for me,
Mm-hmm.
and probably I was too ready to see red flags anyway, but there were none in that one. And I just went weekly for 2 hours a week, and I loved it. I just grew to love it. It was probably in a way most about the meditation, actually. It felt so good. It was like riding in a coach or something, the smooth ride.
Yes.
It was just beautiful. And so I found out, man, I actually like these people, and they were really interesting. They all had kind of lives of their own, out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't really residential, basically, although they periodically did residential retreats, but it wasn't a residential community. And it just seemed really healthy. And I liked what was being taught. It was Zen, but it wasn't liturgical. There were no robes, there were no ceremonies, just interesting talk every couple of weeks, and
Mm-hmm.
on a Thursday night, and normal clothes, normal haircuts.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had a little bit of an allergy to the paraphernalia,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
ritual paraphernalia. I'm basically an atheist, in spite of writing a book called Original Love. I think I haven't really got into religion in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I'm been right into spirituality, but just not religion.
Well, you do have a concept in the book where you compare original love versus original sin, and it offers a reframing that can be very important for a lot of people. So instead of starting our journey from a sense of problem, defectiveness, unworthiness, you instead begin with the premise that love is our original nature, and we can recover it. We can abide there in a different way. And I wonder if you can speak to that some.
Yeah. Well, I am still, in a way, a little bit appalled by how common a sense of self-inadequacy or
Mm-hmm.
even self-loathing is, in our culture. And I don't really know, but I suspect some of it's got to come from that legacy of
Mm-hmm.
the idea of original sin. So I think there's a lot of countering to be done there. So often I find students, like, if they start feeling good, through practice, they get very suspicious about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I shouldn't be feeling this good. I know I've still got these psychological issues to work through, and you know, they may be right, but you're still allowed to feel good. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's such a habit of questioning our deservedness. You know, and I used to think it was just me, but I know it's not. You know, it is a deep cultural affliction, I think. So anything that reframes that you know, and it does seem to me that that's one of the nice things I feel about all these levels of practice, all these dimensions of practice, is that all of them can operate not so much as something we get to or something we acquire through effort, but more as something that shows up when we let go of whatever effort we thought we ought to make, somehow by a release of effort and tension on our part. You know, we just become more present, more mindful. It's, you know, if you know what I mean. Like these good things in practice can show up for sure because we've been consistent and diligent in doing our practice, but often not because we've been really effortfully trying to generate them. I've seen that a lot with students, and I've certainly seen it in my own practice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more like letting the good sort of show up by itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you teach in many different circles, working with inmates in correctional institutions or being with people and families in hospice. And I'm wondering if there are particular communities you're maybe especially drawn to work with these days.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, since COVID, when our center closed, you know, in lockdown, I went through a real shift in the communities I've been sharing practice with, basically because everything went online, and Mountain Cloud Zen Center here in Santa Fe. As soon as we went online, we found there were actually way more people wanting to join our practices than had happened when we were a local center in a somewhat remote city, Santa Fe. And I started, that was right around the time when I wrote the first draft of this book, Original Love. And I also actually had a bike accident around that time. And it had I had a concussion from it that had a very long lasting tail of symptoms. And I couldn't teach in the same one-to-one way that I'd always done. My neurology just couldn't handle it. But I could teach to a Zoom room, you know, with, you know, whatever, a few hundred people or whatever it was in it. And that didn't, I could just do that, but I couldn't do one-to-one. And so that's what I started doing. And I kind of developed a way of sharing more or less what I talk about in this book, Original Love, these different aspects of practice. And then in the midst of all of that, a student offered to help me build an app. And so I've done that. And we now have an app called The Way. And that has, you know, quite, you know, tens of thousands of people using it, which is
That's fantastic. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I want to hear about your meditation app, The Way.
Well, I 4 years ago, I'd never have dreamed of doing something like this. But I've done it. It's happened, and I hope it's helpful. What it does that is completely different, I believe, from every other meditation app, and there's thousands of them, is that it has no choice. There's a single pathway that leads you through these 4 ins, or on the app we call them zones, 4 zones of practice. So you get a guided meditation that actually you can choose the length of it. That's the one thing you can choose, but you can't choose the sequencing. You just follow this pathway every day. As soon as you've done one, the next one unlocks and you can do it, but not before.
Oh, interesting.
So you have to follow this path. And it's kind of, in terms of the world of apps, it's counterintuitive because most of them are built with the idea of the more choice, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing the exact opposite. But somehow it's resonating for people. And it's, well, I mean, the big thing about it for me is that it's just the access we're offering is just so much greater, and it's, because it's everybody can have it for free, or you can pay the low subscription if you want, if you can afford it. But people who would never be able to get to a retreat, who'd never be able to get to a center on a regular basis to get some kind of training, they can get a training, this way. And the main pathway of the app, if somebody, we reckon it's about a 3-year journey. If somebody wants to do that, and you'll be trained to some level, and hopefully to some kind of reasonably wholesome, helpful way.
That's fantastic. So this is not a joke. I'm going to go download it as soon as we get off, because I'm really intrigued by everything that you said, and I appreciate that it's so accessible for people, and that those who can afford to contribute financially, hopefully will, and that will help all the rest of the many beings have access to it. So I think it's really great.
And we've got unhoused people on it. We've got people in recovery on it. It's really been fantastic. It's really, as I'd hoped, reaching all manner of people who might not otherwise feel they could really get into a training.
It's so great. Well, thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing all of your work, truly. And to close our conversation today, I'm hoping you would lead us in a practice of some kind.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. I'm a little bit embarrassed doing this with you, Sharon.
I know. Never mind. Please do it. I always love it. I get to just practice with somebody.
But honestly, one of my mentors, although you don't know it, and oh my gosh. Okay, what the hell? I'll give it a go. So let's just get comfortable. Probably you're going to be seated, most of you. So just let yourself relax into the support that's being offered you by whatever you're sitting on. That might also include support for the back, as well as the buttocks and thighs. So you can either close your eyes or have your eyes open with the gaze lowered. We start by letting the body loosen. So let your jaw sink just a little bit forward and down. And see if you can feel a loosening in the jaw hinges as the jaw slides forward and down. Only a millimeter or two, but enough to kind of unlock the jaw. And then you might feel a softness in your throat. Let the shoulders and arms really hang quite loose. Can there be a softness, perhaps a little warmth also in the chest? A little, maybe just a grain or two of tenderness in the chest. Warmth in the belly, softness in the belly. Let the hips and the upper legs be loose and soft. Knees, lower legs, also loose. Ankles and feet at rest and soft. So the whole body, including back of the neck and back of the head and the whole whole of the head, the whole body field, soft. And really allowing yourself to just rest here and just seeing what it's like. What would it be like, really, if just for a moment there was nothing you had to do? What if there was really, just for now, just for a moment, nothing to solve? What if just for now there's really nothing to fix? What would it be like if you're granted this little respite, refuge, just now, just for now, not having to fix anything? No need to do anything. And when there's really nothing you need do, what's present? What shows up? Just this experience right now. Nothing more needed. Nothing more, just this. Yeah, sure, at times thoughts will bubble up and we may go off for a little while. That's just fine. That's very natural. When you come back, recognize that's been going on and thank yourself, thank your practice for coming back. And can we just be just this? Just this. Really no need for anything special to happen. No need for you to do anything special. Just being. Just this. Just this. And, in the last moment, let's just open our hearts to all beings who are suffering in some way and wish them well. May all beings be safe. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings live with ease. May all beings be well. May we be well. May we be happy. Okay, let's just bring a little movement back into the body, any way that feels good. Maybe have a stretch. Open the eyes if they've been closed. Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's a beautiful practice, and it's been wonderful to share this time with you and learn more about your wonderful work. Come back sometime. We'll keep the conversation going.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me, Sharon. Yeah, it's real joy to be with you.
And thank you so much to all our listeners for tuning in. You, Henry, for being here with us, and may you all take care.
Hey folks, thanks for listening. If you're still with us, you've come to the end of the podcast. So if you'd like to learn more about Henry's work, his many books, including Original Love, this most recent release, and his poetry, of course, you can visit henryshukman.com. That's HenryShukman.com. And if you're intrigued by the app that Henry has developed, The Way, that has a separate website, you can check out thewayapp.com. For all things Sharon, including her various online courses, guided meditations, her many books, and of course, all the other 270 other episodes of this podcast, you can visit her website at SharonSalzberg.com. This has been the Metta Hour podcast, brought to you by the Be Here Now Network. May you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you live with ease.